When was the last time you felt really lost? Like, not just lost physically, but like you'd lost yourself as a person? Well, it happened to me about a year ago. I was in a car park and we'd just moved to Australia recently, and I was in a massive rush. I was feeling really stressed, and there was a moment where I just forgot who I was, what I was doing, and where I was. It was really weird and lonely and strange, and it really felt like I wasn't just lost, but I'd actually lost myself. But this didn't come out of the blue, because moving to Australia for me from the UK was a process of almost total deconstruction of who I thought I was. I gave up my job as a video producer. I lost my country, my mum and dad. I left the city I was born in, my friends, our church, our neighbours, my kids' school community. I gave up our car, I gave up my mobile phone number, and we had 2 suitcases between us, so we lost all of our stuff for the first 6 months. And because it was a pandemic, we ended up not finding anywhere to live, so we swapped our house that we lived in for 12 years in the UK for living in a tent for 3 months. It was pretty crazy. So by the time I got to the car park, it was as if all the things that I thought defined me had been stripped away, and there was kind of nothing left. And so I just sort of shut down. And it was as if the spot that I had occupied in the universe had vacated. There was kind of nothing left, and I didn't know what to fill it with anymore.
So my question today is, who was that woman in the car park? Was she just a blank? Or was there still somebody there? And if so, who was that? Well, I've been looking into this, and I think there are 2 big ideas that would help Car Park Zoe and us understand who we are. I've got them here on my iPad. The first one is that God is our creator, and the second is that God is our redeemer. This is me in boffin mode. Hardly recognisable, I know. This move of going from our knowledge of God to knowledge of ourselves is a signature move of Calvin, who's one of the key theologians of the Reformation. Pretty interesting boffin fact for you. So in this video today, we're going to look at the first one. God is our creator, which means that I am his creature. Now, this has tons of implications for who we are, but I think there's 7 major ones, and I'm calling them identity anchors that help us think about our sense of self when we feel at sea. Let's look at the first one. I am a dependent creature, which means there are boundaries to who we are. Fundamentally, we are the creature, not the creator. So we can't say, I am God, and I know how to define myself better than he does, because that topsy-turvy approach is the definition of sin. As Isaiah explains, you turn things upside down as if the potter were thought to be like the clay. Shall what is formed say to him who formed it, you did not make me? Can the pot say of the potter, he knows nothing? So when Zoe in the car park does rebuild her sense of self, she must let her creator do the talking.
So how do I feel about being a dependent creature? Well, it's pretty tough to think that you are defined by someone outside of yourself, and it's kind of humbling, and also it takes a lot of trust in that person. But I do think that for Car Park Zoe, having had everything stripped away, it's actually quite freeing to not feel that pressure. So that's pretty cool. And I think also having God define me as my creator is kind of cool, because it's like when my boys come in with a Lego construction that they've made, and they don't want me to talk about it. They just want to explain all the features and the bits of it in delight. And I think it's like that with God. He looked at his creation and he said it was very good. And that's what he looks at me. Even when everything has been stripped away and I'm Car Park Zoe, he looks at Zoe and goes, Zoe is very good. That's pretty amazing.
Okay. The next implication of being God's creature is God is intimately involved in my life. I can't shake off the fact he created me. He's not like the divine watchmaker that winds up the universe and steps back. Rather, he's the chief actor and protagonist in this drama of everything that is happening at the heart of the universe, including what's happening to me. In him we live and move and have our being, says Acts 17:28.
So how do I feel about God's immanence and providence as my creator, and how does that affect my sense of self? Well, for Car Park Zoe, I had felt like an astronaut that was kind of floating away in the universe, that I'd lost all connection to anything that grounded me. But this is telling me I'm not like that. I'm more like a a plant who's been lovingly planted in the ground by a gardener. And so I have a place in the universe and I am rooted. And that gives a sense of security and place. And I think that was something that I was really missing when I was in that car park.
But being God's creature is more than being even a plant in a field, because the plant doesn't actually look like the gardener. But the Bible says that we do look like God. It says that we are made in his image. And this is the basis for point number 3. Genesis says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness." So just as Seth bore the image of Adam and Eve in Genesis 3, and Adam and Eve bore the likeness of God, so we bear the likeness of God. And that Hebrew word for image is used when you talk about carving something in wood. So even though we're not divine, we bear a divine likeness. We have a kind of divine imprint on us. Or as Calvin says, man resembles him, God, and that in him God's glory is contemplated as in a mirror. Hello, Objection Zoe here. Put on this stylish hat just so you wouldn't mix me up with normal Zoe. And my objection is, isn't it important that I am unique and different and I express myself? And how can I be those things if God is just my creator and he's cutting me out of one of his molds? I've got an answer to this one. And the answer is that God did not use cookie cutters when he made human beings. God is the ultimate creator. He doesn't make cheap knockoffs, and he made each of us uniquely different, with different voices and different ways of expressing ourselves and different ways of showing and finding our own potential. Now, there are limits to that. I'm never going to be a fish, or I'm never going to be an amoeba, but that doesn't mean that I can't be self-expressive. And the more we mine the image of God in us, the more we delve deep into that, and the more we discover just how amazing and creative God was in making us. There's an immense freedom in that, and that's pretty amazing. But it's not only me who shares this nature of being in God's image, it's every human being who's ever lived. And this gets us to our 4th identity anchor. Every human is like God, no matter what they are, no matter what they've done. C.S. Lewis described this impact of us all being made in God's image as the weight of other people's glory. He put it this way: "The load or weight or burden of my neighbour's glory should be laid daily on my back, a load so heavy that only humility can carry it. There are no ordinary people. You've never talked to a mere mortal. Nations, cultures, arts, civilization, these are mortal, and their life is to ours as the life of a gnat. But it is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub and exploit, immortal horrors or everlasting splendours. This does not mean that we are to be perpetually solemn. We must play, but our merriment must be of that kind which exists between people who have, from the outset, taken each other seriously." So we, as a member of the human race, all have inalienable dignity because we bear the weight of the glory of having the image of God upon us. Now, that's not because we've got more capacity than any other creature and just because we can do extra things. It's not because we've got more evolutionary complexity or that we are able to be moral or able to be rational. No, we have dignity and worth because we bear the stamp of God upon us. We have his inherent yet reflected glory from being made in his image. Here's another boffin note. So this concept of the image of God is the only basis for human rights, and that is because the image of God is not based on capacities which can vary human to human. And it means that those humans who have different capacities, so maybe the mentally impaired or unborn babies, whose capacities vary and are different to a grown adult, because they're made in the image of God, have the same dignity and rights as any other human being.
Now, this idea of me being made in the image of God, no matter how much I fall apart, is pretty mind-blowing. It felt like I lost quite a lot coming to Australia, and I will lose a heck of a lot more when I get old. I might lose my mind, I might lose my physical abilities, and that's when I really need to cling on to the fact that it's not these outward capacities or abilities that define my dignity and worth, but that it's something else, that it's that image of God that he has imprinted on me which creates that. And so that's pretty incredible. And also, even more so, is for me to remember that that image is imprinted on those people who maybe I feel might have harmed me the most in my life. It's on them too, which is pretty challenging.
So our identity anchors so far that help us build a sense of ourselves are: 1, I'm a dependent creature. 2, God is intimately involved in my life. 3, I'm made in God's image, which means I am like God. And therefore 4, everybody is like God because all humans are made in his image. And the next one, number 5, is another consequence of being made in God's image, which is that I have authority and responsibility. In fact, I'm God's vice-regent. Now that is kind of nuts, because vice as in vice president and regent as in queen. So I am God's vice queen. Genesis says, and let them have dominion over all the earth. So we are to exercise God's authority. We are to lovingly look after and rule over creation. I wonder what Car Park Zoe thinks about that.
So Car Park Zoe might be unemployed, but she does have a massively important job to do because she's God's vice-regent. So that means she does have a job to look after God's creation, and she does have a job to uphold social justice according to God's standards. And I think that's definitely something that's really important.
Okay, on to our next identity anchor, which is again related to being made in God's image, which is that we're made to relate to God and to other people. The logic is simple. I'm like God. God is relational, so I am relational. So how is God relational? Well, there's a clue in the pronouns in Genesis 1:26. God says, let us make man in our image, to be like us. Did you spot that plural? God is in community because he is Trinity. And the rest of the Bible reveals that means Father, Son, and Spirit. And as the Bible unfolds, it's clear what separates us from the other creatures is that we were made to know God. And so it's there at the beginning. You can see it there in the inference in Genesis 3 that Adam and Eve were walking in the garden with God before the fall. And it becomes crystal clear by the time you get to the New Testament when Jesus explains that true life for humans is, this is eternal life, that they know you, the only true God. That's John 17:3. And the extension of this is that we were also made to know each other. And we could see this right back in the beginning of Genesis again. So in Genesis 2:18, God makes human beings in 2 different types, male and female, so they could live in loving community with each other. There is a massive elephant in the room here, because even though we're made in the image of God, in our natural selves, we don't want to see that, nor do we want to know God. And in fact, we can't see God or know him properly. And that's because the image in us has been broken. God's image in us has been marred. It's actually like a mirror that's been smashed. So whilst it's there, it's been damaged. And Paul summarizes this really well in Romans. He says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. I.e., we are no longer properly reflecting God's glory. And I think this is where a lot of our confusion with identity comes in, because we are both alienated, not just from God, but also because of that from ourselves, because that image in us we no longer want to look at. And that's where a lot of our problems with identity come from. This is where the 7th identity anchor comes out, and we're coming in here with the big guns. Jesus is the true image of God, and in him we see our true selves. So God needed to cut through our rejection and our blindness and our refusal to see who he was and who we are. And so he did that by sending Jesus to earth to literally be God in front of our eyes. He is the true image of God, and in him we not only see the true God, but we also can finally see our true selves. Colossians 1:15 says, he, Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creations. Hebrews 1:3 says, the Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact expression of his nature. Jesus himself says it in John 14:9. He says, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. Let me explain this in 3 simple steps. So 1, we've been made in the image of God, but we've messed that up. 2, Jesus is the true image of God. So 3, when we look to Jesus, we can see our true selves, and also, more importantly, we can see God. Okay, I know analogies of the Trinity always get us into trouble, but I'm going to have a go anyway. So imagine it's a bit like this. Okay, so Mr. Fabergé makes some eggs and they're all unique and different but equally beautiful. And then I come along and I think I would like to make some Fabergé eggs. So I start making them, but as time goes by, I kind of mess them up and they get like really sloppy and gross. And so what needs to happen is Mr. Fabergé needs to come over to my house. I don't even know there's Mr. Fabergé, by the way, but anyway, just, bear with me. And he looks at my eggs and he's like, no, he shows me a real one and he goes, look, this is what they really are. And as I look at it, I get super excited because I realise, that is what my eggs are supposed to be. And also, even more so, it makes me think, wow, these Fabergé eggs are so fabulously incredible.
So what difference does it make to me that Jesus is the one whom I can look to see the true version of myself? Well, I think for Car Park Zoe, I didn't really think about this at all. And if I'm honest, I think often when I look to Jesus, it reminds me of what I'm not like rather than what I am like. But I think this idea of us being like a mirror, and as we angle ourselves towards Jesus, we will reflect him and his glory more, is really helpful, because I just need to look at Jesus more and more, and then I will reflect him more and more. And so that's a really great encouragement and something practical that I think I can do.
How about this for a different illustration? Okay, so imagine I'm a violinist in an orchestra, okay, and Jesus and the other persons of the Trinity are the composer of the music, the conductor of the orchestra, and also the violin maker. And so Jesus has made a fabulous violin just for me, which is made exactly to my specifications and suits me and makes the only kind of music that I can and know how to play. And so Jesus has given me this beautiful music to play, and in his symphony, I can sit there and I've got a choice. Do I want to play his music, or do I want to do my own thing? Do I want to sit there and maybe play some different music? Or do I want to sit there and maybe do something completely different on my violin altogether, like scrape it on the floor or try and brush my hair with it? But I would be kind of crazy to do that, because I really want to be doing the thing that is bringing out my biggest, best potential, which is to play the music that was made uniquely for me, that was my special melody line, which nobody else could play, which was designed for me and focuses on me. And not only does it bring out the best in me, but even more importantly, it reflects the glory back to Jesus, the composer, the conductor, the violin maker, so that everybody can marvel in what an incredibly amazing symphony that we're all part of. Okay, I've got another objection. So maybe God is the conductor, but what's to stop him orchestrating things in a way that's actually not in my best interest? So what if he gives me a dodgy violin, or he writes me a dud part that I don't like? And maybe, yes, God does have omniscience and he does know everything in the universe, but what's to stop him being like a creepy spy master when he's pulling all the strings and not doing stuff that's good for my life? Well, the answer to this comes in the second thing that we said about God. Remember at the beginning of the video, we said that God was both our creator, but he's also our redeemer. And that means that he's not a creepy spy master and he's not a selfish conductor, because he loved me enough to redeem me, to send his son into the world to die for me. And that is massive, because if he's my redeemer, then I am redeemed. And that is huge for my sense of self. And if you want to know more about that, then watch this video.